Okay, so ANOVAs come in many shapes and sizes. This ANOVA that I've drawn up here is a two-way ANOVA. And the reason I'm calling it a two-way ANOVA is because it has two independent variables. Oh, and by the way, this is completely made up. I just put this together to illustrate some points, okay? One independent variable is the type of criminal that we have. We either have a rapist or the pedophile sex offender, okay? The other independent variable is the type of treatment that they get. We could either put them in prison for a year. I know that's a light sentence, but again, just bear with me. I'm not sure why I said a year, but so be it. We could do chemical castration on these people, or we could just send them to a support group. Now, the dependent variable that I have in mind is number of reoffenses in the 10 years following treatment. Now, what I want to illustrate by this table and this graph is the importance of looking not only at main effects, which would compare rapists to pedophiles, or another main effect would compare types of treatment, but also looking at interactions, which is how the type of treatment interacts with the type of offender on the dependent variable, which is the number of reoffenses. And I really want you to pay attention to something and take note of this fact, that the marginal means here are the same. Apparently, in our study, rapists are going to reoffend 10 times, and pedophiles are going to reoffend 10 times. So you might, if you were just looking at the main effects, and you looked at rapist versus pedophile, you might conclude there's no difference between those groups in terms of reoffending. Similarly, if you just look at these marginal means, which is what the main effects look at, and you asked, is there a significant difference between types of treatment, you would again believe, from looking at this, that there's no difference in treatment. And you might arrive at the conclusion, if you didn't look at the interactions, that it doesn't matter whether you have a rapist or a pedophile, and it doesn't matter whether you give them prison, chemical castration, or a support group, the outcome will always be the same. But of course, if you look at the individual group means, you'll see that in fact there is a huge difference between groups, and that is what will show up on the interaction, which I've graphed right here. And I think you always are better off if you can graph your interaction. Now, I have two lines here, okay? The solid line is the rapist, the dotted line is the pedophile. Now, either of those two groups, you put them in jail, they'll reoffend at the same rate, according to my study that I just made up. If you chemically castrate a rapist, though, you really reduce the amount of offending they're going to do. However, that has no impact at all on the pedophiles. The pedophiles are just as likely, or in fact more so than the mean, likely to offend if they get chemical castration. Then, if you go over here to support groups, look how our pedophiles really appear to benefit from support groups, which reduces their average rate of offending, whereas rapists don't experience any benefit from that and are at their highest rate of reoffending when their treatment is support group. So the take-home message for this is know that when you have a two-way ANOVA or a three-way ANOVA, any kind of factorial ANOVA, you absolutely need to look at the interactions, because interactions can obscure main effects, and you might erroneously believe there are no differences between groups or treatments because those differences are being hidden by an interaction. That's why you look at the interaction to see if it's significant, and if it is, you would end up doing post hoc tests to see, for example, is there a significant difference here? That would be a post hoc test, and is there a significant difference here? would also be answered by post hoc testing. So those are some comments on the factorial ANOVA. I'm not going to go into too much detail about MANOVA, but just remember that a MANOVA is when you have multiple dependent variables, and you can have one-way MANOVA or two-way MANOVA and so on. You can also have a repeated measures ANOVA, which is when your different groups are the same person but being measured at different times. Okay.